Alex Wiley was the consummate tough bastard, but he had a soft side. Don was just trying to steer him to open up. You don't have to have the shield up all the time. There's always a little bit of friction and tension in a high-performance environment. I was lucky enough to do a psychometric test, and I thought, my goodness, that's a bit challenging. That was my biggest learning. It wasn't necessarily about who I was, it was more about my effect on other people. Sometimes you don't get the rub of the green with the ref, you don't get the bounce of the ball because of the shape of it. And as long as you can look in the mirror at the end of every evening going, I've given it my best shot. Does the individual matter first and foremost? How do we set them up? What is it that we learn on the field? What is it that we learn off the field? If we're really going to live the values of care and to love, what does that look like?
My name is Kyla Colbin. You're listening to my interview with Rob Penney, and this is the Hunger and Heart Podcast. Enjoy the show. Hello, my name is Kyla Colbin, and welcome to episode 22 of Hunger and Heart, a podcast on the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. Today, I get to speak with Crusaders head coach Rob Penney. So here's the thing. I get to work with the Crusaders all the time. This is a professional rugby team here in Christchurch, New Zealand. My company, BOMA, is the official and exclusive leadership training provider for the team. And of course, we work together extremely closely to create the Crusaders Leadership Program, which you should definitely check out. It is a 2-week online-only virtual program for coaches and leaders of teams. So I've had the privilege of seeing up close the Crusaders' commitment to connection, to belonging, to culture. But honestly, before today, I really didn't know Rob Penney very well at all. And after talking to him, all I can say is, I get it. This is a man who brings so much love to what he does. I see his awakeness. I see his lack of ego. I see his commitment to people over players, to doing what's right for the team. Even when it could hurt him, it was just extraordinary to witness. In this conversation, we talk about the shift from being driven by hate for the enemy to being driven by love of the game. We talk about how he learned to cope with the pressure of professional coaching and what happened in the off-season to turn things around from 2024 to the champion season of 2025. I loved talking to him. I hope you enjoy listening. Here you are, my conversation with Rob Penney. Thank you so much for coming in, for taking the time, and for letting me be your second ever podcast interview. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Exciting to be here, Kyla. Thanks for the invite.
So we met once before. We met at the theme launch 2024, just anointed to the position, following 7 championships in a row. First season, reasonably challenging, didn't make the playoffs. It had been a while. Following year, massive turnaround to come back and win the championship. So just wanted to provide that context. How's your journey been over the past 2 years?
Yeah, but Mr. Brightsides, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And,
correct.
That first meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots happened in the since that time. That was the theme launch of Great to Greatest, and I still really enjoy talking about that, really, because the Crusaders had won 7 championships in a row, and the Boston Celtics won 7 in a row between 59 and 66, and so they are still the greatest. Unfortunately, last year wasn't the greatest. There were some challenges in that year for all the things, I guess, that we might dip into some of those a bit later, but so proud of the group, the way they held together, and particularly the pressures on the staff in the high performance area, got the learnings that we needed, dug deep into the review, multi-layered, external, internal, and there was some really subtle key learnings. Nothing that you would call massive rocks, big rocks that you would think, goodness sake, there's some disasters here. But the learnings were, really, really well handled. The management of the Crusaders showed massive integrity. Got nothing but great things to say about the hierarchy and the board and the way they didn't panic. under the blowtorch. And, I guess the lessons that were learnt in 24, the depth that the players committed to in 25, and everyone helped and supported those athletes to achieve a great outcome at the end of 25. So that was a wonderful turnaround.
We will go into that a little bit more, but I want to back up and start really early on and find out a little bit more about your story. And the thing I'm particularly interested in to start with is you've been coaching like forever. Like, I understand that when you were playing in high school, you were coaching under sevens. What led you to coach? Why? Why did you want to do that?
Well, it's a great initiative it was actually at my club side. So I'd just left school in our club side, and I made the senior side at club rugby pretty early, and they had an initiative where they allocated a senior player with a junior team. So we all had this. It was an obligation, but it was a great privilege looking back. And so I just went in boots and all, didn't really know what I was up to. I just shared some stuff with the kids, but that was, I guess, my first insight into being able to share, I guess, what I knew with somebody else and see them grow and prosper on the back of it and the joy that they had. And I've never forgotten those early moments, but as you've alluded, I've been coaching all the way through, and I've had coaches that were incredible people and mentors while I was playing, but also that allowed me to have a lot of input. And I still firmly believe the best teams have great, leaders and I guess people that have control of the game, because they're out there playing it. And it's always been in the back of my mind, is just allow the people to grow and utilise their knowledge and skill so they can apply it in game. And so, those early days were very, I guess, formative in my coach development, and lucky enough to work with some great people along the way, and you learn every moment that you're doing it.
Did they teach you how to coach, or did they just kind of chuck you out there, like as part of the program, where they just like, here's some 7-year-olds, have fun? Or were they like, here's some things you want to think about in terms of X's and O's, and also in terms of how to get the most out of them?
Yeah, no, it was very much just thrown to the wolves. Yeah. And it was it was normally a parent or somebody like that you would come along and support. They would do all the donkey work. You'd turn up on a Thursday night and help them before you'd go to your own training, and then you'd turn up Saturday, and you might share the oranges, bring the oranges every couple of weeks, or buy them a little treat after the game. But it was just around supporting that parent and offering as much of the rugby stuff as you could, and very quickly you realise what we all really understand around getting the best out of people is getting the group connected, having fun, making it really enjoyable, not focusing too much on the outcome, very much process orientated. So, sometimes you just got no control of the opposition. You might have a young, small team and they're just going to get whipped every week. But to make it enjoyable for them, it's what they do. And if they can see a little bit of progress, we all know that's going to be of benefit. So that was where the excitement grew for me about, the coaching journey.
Can I dig into that? Because very quickly you realize that connection is key, and making it fun for them. And it's not about the outcome, it's about the process. That's what I just heard you say. And my experience is lots of people don't realize that very quickly, right? I go to my kids' sport, and there are the signs on the field that say this is a game, the coaches are volunteers, the refs are this is not Super Rugby, et cetera. And even in Super Rugby, we wouldn't want some of the behavior that we see sideline. Did you have any particular influences or people in your life that helped you see that actually connection and fun and process over outcome was a better way to go? Or was this something that was kind of innate to you? Like, how did you get there?
I think I formulated that view quite early on. And while I was heavily involved in playing, that was part of my philosophy when I was lucky enough to captain some sides on the way through, and usually had because I was pretty outgoing and probably very outspoken, and so I had a strong view on how teams could work, and it was based on all those elements of connection and get the process right. You're not always going to win. I desperately wanted to win. I was ultra competitive, and as we discussed earlier, my ego was as big as anybody's when I was playing, and but you also had to have the balance when you, as I was talking about, the learning as a coach. When you're not playing, you don't have a lot of control, and it's about allowing the young people to have a great experience and enjoy what they're doing, and they roll back in on Tuesday or Thursday whenever you're training with them again next, and there's a element of growth and a reflection and where they're going to move to next, there's great joy in that. Yeah.
Obviously, this podcast, it's called Hunger and Heart. It's about the intersection of wild ambition and fierce compassion. And one of the themes that I am so obsessed with is this theme of how does the kind of care that you're talking about, the kind of drive for connection and belonging and being able to have fun with it and be able to have joy, tie in with the desire to win. And of course, when you're coaching under sevens, you said you might have a team that gets whooped every week, and that's just how it goes. And as long as they're able to have some fun with it, you're okay. When you get to Super Rugby, if you're getting whooped every week, obviously you need to do some soul searching and kind of figure out what's going on. How does your philosophy about connection, belonging, joy, being able to have fun with it, process over outcome, play out as the stakes get higher and as the expectations on performance get higher?
Well, it's not an easy dynamic to deal with because of those very reasons. You've got responsibilities across an organisation to lead a team to perform well and hopefully get a high performance outcome. But the two aren't mutually exclusive. I think we talked about this before, and when you're in a team like the Crusaders, who have such a great history and tradition, and world class in a lot of areas, and have set the framework for teams to look to be successful. And there's some key elements like care, hard work, resilience that you need to have in any organisation to be successful. And then you tailor those in or thread those in amongst the world-class athletes we've got, and then you really lift that care element to beyond what is probably a normal sporting relationship. It's deep, and we talk about it being in our DNA. That may be some arrogance in that, and it fluctuates a bit, of course. Sometimes the athlete's perception of the care probably isn't as where you'd love it to be consistently, because messaging sometimes is harsh or tough. Like if a guy's not being picked and he's training brilliantly but he just can't get access, that's very downheartening. But every organisation has those challenges, whether they're a great worker or employee in a business, or they're a rugby player or a sports person of some note. So I'll go back, and I think your question about how to rationalise those 2 points about being totally determined and having empathy. I agree with your statement that we talked about before, that they're not mutually exclusive. One will feed the other and back and forth. And it's just about, for an athlete who is desperately keen, just wants to know the black and white detail, they still need to have an arm around them. They still need to know that the care's there. And when they're prepared to open up a little bit as they mature and start to understand environments, that there's a lot more in this game and in this group than just the sporting context.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, one of the things that I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday and making an observation about professional sport in particular. But I think it's an observation that if we're smart, we can apply in all sorts of different areas, which is that you cannot deliver what you do. Or I'm going to share a hypothesis. You tell me if I got it correct or if I need to update my assumptions. My belief is that you cannot deliver what you are tasked with delivering with technical effort alone. That if there is not that element of discretionary, I'm going to dig deep, I'm going to do that extra that's not about how many reps I've done or how much I've trained, but that is about I'm going to just pour my soul into this in this moment, that the team that can pour their soul into it is going to beat the team that is equal to them technically or on the skills front. Is that a fair hypothesis?
Oh, 100%. I think one, David Hadfield, who was a sports psych a long time ago around New Zealand rugby, very capable man. Anyway, he said to me early in my transition into coaching as a professional was, they want to know you care before they want to know what you know. And that stuck with me. It was a really poignant, succinct, salient saying that came, and it just struck me. I sort of had that philosophy, but he summed it up in a very succinct manner for me. And you did right. There are elements of a hungry athlete that's determined and driven that just wants to know. But there'll be a point when they need the care. And as long as the care is always there, it's like when the student is ready, the teacher appears, it's available to them whenever they require it. And then the total sum of the parts will be so much greater if all you're doing around your technical, tactical, gym stuff, cognitive learning is wrapped up in love. It'll be so much more powerful.
Let's stick with that word love, because I heard, I did a bunch of research on you prior to this conversation, and I heard you use that word, and I heard you describe the shift in rugby away from being driven by hate for the opposition and towards being driven by love of the game and the process and potentially the outcome. How did that shift happen? And did you have, one of the things I'm really curious about actually is Grizz Wiley, who by all accounts, I didn't know Grizz, but by all accounts was an incredible coach and tough guy, reasonably gruff guy, kind of hard as nails guy. And here you are coming out, and Smithy coming out, and people coming out who were coached by him or who looked up to him, coming out with this heart first, empathy, care, love kind of approach. What's going on? What's driving that shift? How do we get from the historical, harden up court session type environment to where we are today?
Goodness. He was the Alex Wiley was the consummate tough bastard. When he played, I think he had 180 odd games for Canterbury back in the day when they were pretty brutal, 30 odd test matches, played for the All Blacks. Obviously, great rugby career himself, and transitioned into coaching quite quickly. But he had a soft side, and this is a bit unusual. We played, my very first tour was to Bulla on the West Coast. And I just turned 20, I think, and my first tour with Canterbury, and there was a lot of drinking going on. And we had a few beers the night before, which was unheard of for me at that time. Anyway, after the game, we did this game. We walked around the keg, and we raced each other basically to drink to the bottom of the keg. And it was I think it was a Sunday night. And I went to the toilet, and I heard Alex's voice following him in, and I was petrified. It wasn't, I absolutely petrified. So I ducked into the cubicle to hide. And one of the greatest guys you'd ever meet is Don Hayes, who was a great foil for Alex. Don was a real, someone that I looked up to. He was the captain of Canterbury, didn't make the All Blacks, but probably should have. Another one of those really talented men that led through his actions, but he had great empathy. So it was a great foil, but there was a conversation in that little cubicle. Alex was lamenting and he was quite emotional about the fact that he felt he couldn't connect with the young ones. And I'm sitting in this cubicle hearing
One of the young ones.
private conversation with this captain, and Don, it was beautiful. Don was just trying to steer him to open up. You don't have to have the shield up all the time. It was it was quite a poignant moment. So anyway, Alex had a softer side. He wanted probably to be closer, but he also had this persona that he had to live up to, which probably it just became the norm for him to be that. But I know Smithy, in particular, knew Alex very, very well because he played some amazing games for Canterbury during that era. Rob Dean's another one. And those two in particular had a lot of time with Alex. So they saw the softer side, and Dougie Bruce was also a great empathetic mentor. So gruff old Alex, and then you had the softer side of Dougie, and Donnie's EQ was enormous. He could talk about anything, he could drive you, but because he was so highly regarded and well respected, he had the ability to slip between Alex and the team. I think there was some learnings osmotically done there, unbeknown at the time, but on reflection, Alex, was a very smart tactician, probably had the very early days on transitioning the game to be much more tactically astute as opposed to just smashing each other, running straight. And so that was really stimulating for all of us. And as I say, there was just a little underbelly there that every now and then you got a glimpse of, and I think that was the start of it.
Did your relationship with Alex change after that?
Not really. A dear friend of mine, Shane Philpott, passed away about 18 months ago, and he was only 58, but he was in Alex's World Cup group, fabulous player, and Alex came to his funeral, and I was still intimidated.
Doesn't go away. Hey?
No, it doesn't go away.
But what I'm hearing is that what you took away from that experience was a certainty in your heart that your coach cared for you.
Yeah, definitely. He was trying to find a way, and he just didn't have the tools.
Yeah. I also heard you tell the story of being selected for Canterbury 20. I might have the details wrong, so again, please correct me. Around 20 years old, there was an injury, and you got the call up. And you said the coach made you feel so welcomed and such a sense of belonging. Do you recall what your coach did to make you feel that way, and why was it important to you?
Well, it was that was around the same time that I've just told that story, really. And it was, as I've said, Alex was an intimidating beast. So it probably wasn't him, but it was more the group of senior leaders. Don Hayes, as I'm talking about, like you had to earn your stripes, but he also gave you room to make a mistake. And so it was very rigid, I guess, standards, and it was very hard to. Well, you didn't want to step out of line. You wanted to do everything right, and it was quite a tough environment in a number of ways. But it was also how success was built back in the day, when you pull guys together from all sorts of backgrounds, and just you don't have a lot of time to prepare 2 or 3 training runs, and then you're out there. So the cohesion factor wasn't always great, but to enhance the cohesion factor is try to get the connections off the field and talk about family and life and so forth. So those inroads were happening then, and it definitely happened at club level prior to that, where 20 to 26, 27 years of age, the club side I had just was a eclectic group, but a magic group of people that were very much focused on trying to be successful, but knew, I don't know whether they knew, but anyway, we had a group of guys whose wives and we got married at a similar age. the girls all became great friends and still are. Our kids are, we all had kids about the same time. And so that whole family environment through the club allowed those connections to be enhanced. So, I think that's, without specifically identifying which coach, I think it was just elements of coach and players. When you see how a well-connected group without there's always a little bit of friction and tension in a high-performance environment, but everything becomes, I use the term silk or sandpaper, things become like silk when the connections are there and the trust's there. It turns to sandpaper when there's no connection and no care, and obviously that wears away. Whereas silk just slides through, and you're able to get on with the next thing.
What kind of tension comes up in a high performance environment when you have? Let's assume you have a team that has that fantastic connection, that trust, that care. What are the kinds of tensions that arise?
Most of them around performance conversations, which I'm alluding to around a player not being selected or being dropped out of a group and being superseded by somebody else, and how that conversation's conducted. And I don't think you ever get good at them. You've got to know as best you can what makes the individual tick. But in any given day, we're all different emotionally, time pressures and so forth. In your working day, you've got 50 people and you've got 23 of them you're preparing for a contest at the end of the week. And sometimes the conversations may or may not go to as well as planned. And so therefore you've left an athlete with uncertainty, probably feeling as though that we don't care or the coaches don't care. And that can lead to a bit of a vicious cycle of downward motivation and all the things that we pride ourselves on being really good at, but every group have the problems with performance conversations. It's no different when you're talking to your staff at work about reviews and so forth in their employment situation. It's how you handle those. And we're doing some PD across the board quite consistently on how we can be better, but it's hard to nail.
Yeah. So I just heard you say it's hard to nail. You never get good at those. What have you learned about having those conversations? What's been effective?
Well, I think if you go back to know your athletes as best you can, there's a thing, and you would have heard, called mattering, which is we're delving into at the moment, which is a concept of, does the individual matter first and foremost? How do you prove that? Do you know about their family? Do you know their background? Do you know what issues that they're coping with right now? How deeply do you actually understand that individual that you're dealing with? And then does what they do matter? It's a great concept of, if you can align the two, then the person at the other end of the conversation should first and foremost feel as though they're respected and that we care for them. And then on the other side of it, that what they do matters. It may not mean that they're going to get access to the big game at the end of the week, but what they do for the other 6.5 days is really, really important. And so that mattering piece, it's a really powerful concept that we're starting to build into what we do around those conversations. So that hopefully will alleviate or grow us all in that sector.
What you've just described speaks again so beautifully to the heart of the reason for this podcast. This thing of, if I can be seen, if I can be accepted for myself as a human being, independent to performance, then the performance conversation becomes so much more impactful and so much more accessible. Whereas if I feel like we're only having the performance conversation, but you have no idea what's going on for me or why, or, what's driving me or what I care about, or, do I want to learn, et cetera, then what you have to say is just not going to find any kind of purchase.
100%. It goes back to what we talked right at the start of it, didn't it? The two elements of care and high performance go hand in hand to get the best outcome. And this is just another strategy to try to I guess, drive a better structure for us to have those conversations. There's another book, Owen Eastwood's Belonging, which is a lovely, spiritual side of it, which allows for all that, being authentic. You can't not be who you are, but also having the ability to, allow people to, or show that they are well connected, that they belong, and they're important. Rightio. At this point in time, your passion is to play, and we see that, and you're giving it everything, and these are some things that might help you on that pathway. There's no guarantee we're going to pick you, even if you do these things, but we do care, and it's sometimes athletes don't hear that either. A big part of the learning strategy, I think, for any organisation that has difficulty with performance conversations, the language and the words you use are crucially important, but educating the people on listening is equally as important, and remembering that the person giving the information, if they're authentic and showing care, isn't doing it with malice. They've just got a conversation to have with you, and you've got to be able to embrace that. And there's a degree of resilience factor in there that you need to have to be able to cope with that and build on it.
I'm curious about, one of the things that people struggle with in the conversation about the intersection of care and performance is this idea that, look, you can empathize all you want, but at some point you have to get the job done. And I'm curious about how you think about standards and those performance conversations, like how you think about what's acceptable, not acceptable, holding people to accountability, all those kinds of things in the context of being a caring, empathetic leader.
It's a really good one, because we had some feedback in 24 at the start of the campaign. I'm someone that believes that an athlete's going to do everything they can to be as good as they can. No one makes mistakes on purpose. Nobody drops a ball because they're trying to drop it. Okay, there might be a slippage in concentration for a moment, or they might be trying to over-exceed, but growling at people in my mind, doesn't ever work. The only time I think you have the capacity to get a bit grumpy is if they're slack in terms of their mental preparation, or if their work ethic's not there. And we back our young men that those two elements are deeply ingrained. So if you have that premise, keeping people to account shouldn't be okay. The accountable conversations are held in private. I'm not one for challenging people in a team room around their skill sets or decision making. It might be a conversation around what do you think we could have done here differently, or what were other options. But that's a group conversation, and you're expecting other people to put their hand up and say, I could have offered more here, I could have said something, or I could have done something different to help that person. And I think that's where you get really good synergy. You get group learning. People see the game through other people's lenses. So you have the private conversations, you have those positively geared group conversations, and then on the back of that, I think what you're starting to develop, because one of the biggest handbrakes for young men is confidence and belief, and then they've got to go and do their activity under scrutiny of, we had 1 million people watching our final. So there's a lot of scrutiny on the boys when they go out there, and some of them are, vulnerable young men that. I'm highly optimistic and positively geared in my language, and I think our whole coaching group is, which is awesome. There's great alignment there. And going back to your conversation, sorry, I've probably gone around in circles a little bit, but the accountability piece is a judgment on where you think the guys can cope with the conversation. And I've seen coaches bore out players in front of their peers, and not only do you lose that athlete, you lose their friends, because if they're well connected, they will be friends, and then your ability to coach is so much more challenging. Once they're gone, they're hard to get back. So, as I say, accountability. We talk about, one aspect of leadership. What we've morphed into, and Craig Philpott brought this to us. He's a coach educator working for the New Zealand Rugby Union, which we've tapped into a lot, and he's been really valuable for us. Is this concept of guardianship as opposed to leadership? So guardianship means I'm a first year player. I have as much responsibility to guard the behaviours, the history, the traditions, the values as a year 10 player. I might not verbalise my view to the whole group at a meeting, but I have a responsibility. Simple things like if the kitchen's not tidy and he knows who's left it untidy, to go and tap them on the shoulder and say, I'm a bit embarrassed to say this, but this isn't how we leave the kitchen at the Crusaders. You know what I mean? So guardianships for us is going to become really, really important for everybody to feel as though they have a responsibility to look after this red and black machine. And so if you think about guardianship on the field, if your teammate isn't doing what you require him to do, you got to tell him and have a conversation. And that doesn't have to be brutal. In fact, it shouldn't be. It's a learning opportunity. How come you're doing this? Oh, because I see this. Oh, I wanted you to do this because I'm seeing this. Because it's such a complex game. Lots of different things happen, and we don't all see the same thing. And so those guardianships of the important elements of our game are where we get our accountability. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. There's a lot in there, and there's a lot that I want to dig into and unpack. One of the things I want to start with is you mentioned 1 million people watching the final in 2025. And one of my observations is that the job of a coach changes quite a bit. There's a whole set of skill sets that enter into the picture at your level that were not present when you were coaching under sevens, right, when you were in high school. And so my question there is, how did you learn how to cope with those additional obligations in terms of scrutiny, in terms of media exposure? How did you learn how to deal with those things, and what did you learn about yourself in the process?
I think a bit of grey hair helps. Maturity, time in the saddle. And as you say, when I was first came into the professional coaching ranks, great mentor in Aussie McLean. He had some success with Canterbury. He went on to coach the Hurricanes out of this environment, and he was another one that came through the sort of Grizz Wiley era, if you like. And Steve Hanson's father, actually, Des Hanson, who coached Marist, where Aussie played and Steve played, was another great mentor for all of us. As an opposition coach, he would be someone that would always come and tap me on the shoulder and have a chat about the game, which I found fascinating. No coaches ever did that, but he would always seek me out, I felt.
Like after the game?
He coached Marist and I played for Burnside. And he would, as an opposition coach, we would end up in the corner.
Yeah. With you as a player, and he would talk to you.
Yes, I was an opposition player.
Amazing.
And through that, and I went and saw him at his home, and he was so generous with his time. I guess he was somebody that was so empathetic and so passionate about the game. He just wanted to see good people playing the game to the best of their ability, and he thought he had something to offer, saw something in me, and it was awesome. But anyway, Aussie came through, so I was really lucky to work with Aussie for my first couple of years. But I was highly driven, and I think I'll go back a wee step about psychometric testing. I had no idea my personality and how it worked and how it rubbed other people potentially in sandpaper up the wrong way. So I was oblivious I just thought being driven was the right way to go. And I didn't realise that I was putting the fear of, into people who weren't ready to be going as fast as I wanted it to go. So I had some success with Oz. We won a NPC and we won the Ranfurly Shield. And then I took over as head coach, and Aussie moved away. And about year 2 of that, I was lucky enough to do a psychometric test, and our management group did it, and this was any aspiring coach out there, I'd really encourage to get someone like the disc profile or dotting, whatever it does. It's not complex, it's not hard. I showed this profile to my wife anyway, because I read it and I thought, my goodness, it's a bit challenging.
Can I ask what was challenging about it?
Just the way in which my personality impacted on others. And that was my biggest learning. It wasn't necessarily about who I was. It was more about my effect on other people. So if I was highly read in terms of driven, and all I wanted to do was get to the end point right now. Hurry up. Why are we wasting so much time talking about this? Just get on with it. Not realising there's a whole broader community that need to know the details. They want to know to the nth degree. So I needed to slow down. I needed to take people with me. But I guess that was my epiphany as a young aspiring coach, to go, there's a whole, I'll use a cliched word, journey here for me to go through and help, I guess, to have an integrated process, you need to take people with you. And that was I would lead from the front and charge. And over time, I've been able to sit in the middle and let it all unfold around me. And then as I guess had some success through Canterbury with the Ranfurly Shield and with NPCs or Air New Zealand Cups and so forth. And then I went to Munster and had some success there. But I also realised it was fickle. You know, there were games you would win that you reflect back and you go, if that had gone the other way, that was a point difference. And so by the time I got here in 24 and we were having narrow losses and so forth, and we're having issues with our injury of our status, I kept a pretty even keel in a lot of ways. The pressure was pretty horrendous, but particularly more so on the family, I think. It was, but it was, I guess, because I'd been able to lead from the middle and survey, and I guess a lot of the time you're in the helicopter looking down and overseeing, you realise there's elements that are totally out of your control. You just do the best you can. As long as you can look in the mirror at the end of every evening going, I've given it my best shot. What happens on game day now is up to the men, that are going to do the job on the park. And our game's complex, and sometimes, you don't get the rub of the green with the ref. You don't get the bounce of the ball because of the shape of it. And it's just sometimes that happens. And that's what I was talking about before. It takes a long time to get there because as an early coach, your ego's so entwined in your activity and you have to do it because you've got a family to feed and it's your job and you want success. The organisation wants success. But over a very short, I think that the main transition from playing to coaching is get rid of your ego. It's all about the players. And all you're doing is trying to feed their well and make them better and grow and giving them confidence and belief and hope. Because the opposite to hope is hopelessness, and that just can't permeate anything in your environment. And even last year we talked about, there's still something to work for. We're still in this right up until the last game. We still had hope, and the boys were great. They tried their best under challenging circumstances. But I think that to answer your question briefly, getting rid of the ego as a coach and moving in, being able to lead from the middle and from the back, and not be concerned about conversations that other coaches are having with players. You don't have to know everything because you can't. Trusting the people that are in your environment to lead their aspects, because they want to do the best job they can do, and they don't need, I guess, someone in my position hovering over there, wanting to know the detail and not allowing them to express themselves and spread their wings. They need to do it their way. Mm-hmm. and then I'm just there to support and encourage and nurture. And I'm so proud of the young coaching group that have come through under that criteria.
So much in there. I love it. Okay, I want to recap a little bit of it, and then I've got some questions, and I've got some questions about 24, 25 transition. So one of the things I heard you say when you were talking about the psychometric profiling, I was like, are you holding up a mirror to me right now? Because certainly one of the things I've always struggled with as a leader, and I've got some of my team in the other room listening to this, and I'm acutely aware of this, is I have a massive level of ambition. I'm very much a charge forward, drive it forward kind of person. And I heard you say about the that growling at people doesn't produce results. And then you said you can growl sometimes when it's, I forget what the thing was, and work ethic. And one of the things that I've that I've had to learn the hard way, and that I understand intellectually, and I can still get caught out by, is that even when growling is justified, it's not impactful. That even when there's a behavior that needs to be called out or addressed, or standards put in place or accountability held to, that coming at that from a position of, we need to do this because you've pissed me off, is, in my experience, has been the least effective way of addressing things. Whereas coming at it from, actually, this is what we've agreed to, or this is what the needs are, or this is the invitation to be better, is the stuff that drives outcomes. And it's still something that I struggle with personally. And so I guess I'm raising this to ask you, if that was your personality and you have the epiphany that, like, hey, growling maybe not the best thing, did you ever struggle with, like, yeah, I know growling's not the best thing, and I still get a bit growly?
100%. Still, it doesn't change who you are.
Yeah.
But you just got to learn to modify your behaviour. You have some emotional control.
Yeah.
Take deep breaths, count to 10, bite your tongue, all those things. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. But I would never have had the coaching opportunities I've had if I hadn't. If I'd stayed the same. And that's what you look at a young athlete and people go, oh, he can't do this or can't do that. Well, who said he can't? Has he been coached? Has he been allowed? Can he grow? Or she? Can they be better given opportunity? Because I know that I'm not the same person I was 25 years ago at all. Yeah. And I should say, what I've learnt, I guess, to do really well is I've learnt to hide the elements that were causing the sandpaper moments so well that I've almost gone down and become that person. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
But there are moments that I lose my shit.
Yeah. I mean, fair. Potentially public moments as well.
Yes.
Okay. And then the other thing that I heard you talk about is the team, and how that you talked about guardianship. And one of the things I've heard through the work that, I and BOMA that we've done with the Crusaders organization that comes through over and over again is this concept of leaderful teams. At BOMA, we have a saying that we refer to all the time, which is, we're not sitting in traffic, we are traffic. We're not experiencing the culture of the organization, we are the culture of the organization. And this invitation to go, actually, what does it look like to make sure that every person who comes through the door, whether they're a rookie athlete, someone in the academy, a veteran who's been around for 10, 15 years, how do we get them to see that actually they are entirely in charge of their own experience? And there's an interesting thing that I heard coming through, which is this thing of going, what is in my control or power and what is not? And what's not is the bounce of the ball, the physics of the interaction with the grass at that point, and the directional forces and all that. What is in my control is how I respond to that. What's not in my control is someone else tied it up after themselves in the kitchen. What is in my control is I'm going to go have a word with them. Are those conversations, I'm making this observation through the course of a conversation with you, are those kinds of conversations about, like, invitation to ownership, are those the explicit conversations that you have with the team? How do you go about building that kind of culture?
Mahatma Gandhi, who took over India from the British colonial I think it was about 55, said culture lives in the hearts and the souls of the people, and it's resonated with me ever since. So, of course, your culture is bound around your values and your beliefs and your behaviours, but and they're what bind you together, I guess, in a way. But it's the people within it that have the nuances, isn't it? And the conversations that we had at the end of 24 into 25 was very much overtly along the lines of guardianship. You have a responsibility to maintain the legacy. Really proud of what David Havili did in transitioning our leadership model within the team.
What did he do?
He came to me when we started talking about him taking over the captaincy. I said to come to me with the setup, who you'd like as your VCs and so forth. So he had 3 quite overt, really popular individuals within the group that he called upon to be his vice captains. And then he had a group underneath that he gave little portfolios to. And Davey, he just wanted to make sure the team played well. And that was his overriding goal. He trusted implicitly the guys underneath to take care of their portfolios, and they were the connection pieces and making sure the team was well bound together and had great social times together. And the non-playing group were being well catered for and well set up. But that was the window of opportunity that the team needed. And there's a group of, don't like to use the word emerging leaders, but they're creating the traffic now instead of being stuck in it. Mm-hmm. And we've only dipped our toe in that area, and we need some more help to get better at it. But I think we're on a really good trajectory with it, and I think the leadership, the genuine leadership that we have, and the funnel of the future leaders is becoming, it's like the ballcock's been released. Mm-hmm. They're starting to flow through because Davey's a great delegator, doesn't need to know everything about everything, but he knows what he needs to know, and he's all over what he needs to know, and he's strong on what he needs delivered by the people around him to get what he needs out of them. Mm-hmm. That whole aspect of the guys below that have the responsibility as much as the top guys around the guardianship bits, which is slightly softer skills. Mm-hmm. It's just the everyday, how things are done around here. Mm-hmm. And it's exciting where that piece is getting to too. Hopefully that's answered your question. I'm not sure if it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got more, and I know we don't have a lot of more time together, but I do have a couple more questions. So I heard you talk about, the men that you work with are extraordinary human beings. Safe to say, beautiful, active leadership at all levels of leadership in terms of guardianship, ownership, accountability, et cetera. I heard you talk about that the opposite of hope is hopelessness. I was chatting with my 15-year-old stepson on the weekend. I was telling him that I was going to have this conversation with you. So he's third 15. They just won their final on Saturday. Very exciting. And I said, what would you ask Rob? And he said, what was the conversation like in the off season between 2024 and 2025? Which I thought for a 15-year-old was a very astute question. And I've heard you describe the difference between 2024 and 2025 as, obviously you have a different roster. You had a whole bunch of folks out with injury in 2024. And so, the ingredients that you have are materially different from one year to the next. And 2024, the scale of pressure that you're under coming off of, the run and then heading into a season that did not go nearly as well as you would have hoped, or a lot of folks would have hoped. How do you maintain hope? What do you do? Yeah, you've got the people coming back from injury. Again, to my mind, that's the technical, tactical. We've got those skills. How do you maintain the belief that we are champions?
What's your stepson's name?
Sawyer.
What a champion!
He
Congratulations
is a champion.
on your trophy win mate. Well done. I guess the simple answer is I'm highly optimistic, falling off the cliff optimistic. So, massive belief in the group. Coaches, we got good alignment. We had good alignment anyway, but we were still a young coaching group together with our time. So that was important. And then we had another transition with Tamati Allison leaving last year and Brad Moore coming in. So there was another element of, I guess, transition within the coaching group. So those conversations that Sawyer's referring to were based on our own gut feel. Anyone out there that's coaching, gut feel is a massively important element. Trust your instincts, and it's all based on your experiences anyway. It's not just some flimsy, whimsical thing that you feel. Gut feel is based on, as I say, your experiences and so forth. So the conversations weren't challenging, weren't difficult. They were just focused, and we got good alignment around what is it that we need to get right to help this group be better. And out of I'll just go back a tiny little bit. Dave Darbilly was captain. There were Will Jordan, Ethan Blackadder, Cody Taylor were his vice captains. None of them were very available in 24 with injury. Scooter Barrett had injury issues. And we had to place some people a lot longer than we would have liked to, some of the younger blokes. But anyway, so having them back was one of the critical bit, and their evolution as a leadership group, as I've just discussed, was really important, and allowing that to have a massive influence over the group. And the conversations that we had was about setting them up. How do we set them up? What is it that we learnt on the field? What is it that we learn off the field? What is it that we learnt around the if we're really going to live the values of care into love, what does that look like? How do we exhibit that regularly, consistently, and be authentic with it? So there was a few streams, Sawyer, to get, I guess, the 4 or 5, 6 big things that at the start of our campaign, these were going to be our bedrocks. Some of them were rugby, some of them were interaction, social connection pieces, and some of them were medically, physically, so that we could have our athletes available for us more often.
That falling off the cliff optimism, did everyone share that, or was there anyone? Did you have to have any conversations of like, hey, we're not going to think like that. We're not going to go down that path. We are a champion team. We will always be a champion team. Like, was there anyone who struggled with the, like, I know you believe, and we've just had a really hard season, and I'm struggling with my own belief? Did you have to navigate that at all?
Not overtly. There's some subtle conversations that you'd go, I don't think you're deeply, not investor's the right word, but believing that you can win based on. But most of the people were, once we got the group together in November and December and January, we normally have a group that doesn't include the All Blacks, and the All Blacks drip feed in later. We had All Blacks coming in early, so they were deeply invested. Proud men, loved this place and wanted to, and it didn't take long. Everyone got onto the bus really quickly. And as I say, there was a good alignment, and the purpose and the vision was there, and away we went.
Mm-hmm. We're pretty much at the end of our time together. I want to close with an observation that's not so much a question, but I would invite any reaction that you have to it, which is my observation of the leadership demonstrated within the Crusaders organization. And so first of all, new coach, rough season, the calmness exhibited by Colin Mansbridge, the chief executive, by Angus Gardiner, by the team to go, we're not going to panic. We're not going to knee-jerk anything here. we're not going to be blind to the challenges. We're going to do a review. We're going to look at what needs to be addressed. Is it addressable? Is it not addressable? We see all this, and now we're going to move forward with what we believe to be right. So that's the first thing, is my observation of that level of demonstrably steadfast leadership and commitment to what the organization proclaims to be important. And then the second thing is that same kind of leadership coming from you. One of the things I heard you talk about after this season, I heard you in an interview being asked about whether you were going to, it was before it had been announced that you were sticking with us for another season. And I heard you, here you've just come off the back of arguably one of the most extraordinary turnarounds in professional sports. And they were saying, are you going to stick around? And your answer was, look, we're doing a review and we'll see what comes out of the review. And I will only stick around to the degree that I'm useful. And that struck me, again, as such an extraordinary act of leadership, of this kind of commitment to, it is not about what feels good to me. It is not about what noise is coming from the media or from the people commenting on stuff. It is about how can we serve the athletes, the players, the team, the kaupapa. And so I don't really have a question there, but I just want to share that reflection to you. And, if you have any thoughts on that, I'd certainly be open to them.
Yeah, well, I mentioned at the start, so I'll repeat it really. Colin Mansbridge, Angus Gardiner, and the board, Grant Gerard, who was the chairman at the time, and Brent, who is the chairman now, can't speak highly enough about the way in which they conducted everything. People were searching for answers that weren't necessarily there. People were, particularly the media, no matter what answers they were given around the issues, it didn't matter. They weren't listening. So that caused another layer of anxiety and pressure for the organisation. I see other sporting organisations in similar situations, but maybe because they're not Canterbury and red and black, they're not treated with the same pressure points as those men were. As I said, can't speak highly enough. They had every right probably to consider exiting me, and I'm a small cog in a big wheel, and I would have been devastating, but they didn't, and I'm forever grateful. And the outcome is what it is, and I think it's a great lesson. When you reflect on, as you alluded, the turnaround wasn't based on some magic sprinkle dust that I brought to it. It was just great review. The rugby gods blessed us a little bit more than they had the previous year. And even you reflect back, we played the Blues here in the rain. We got 2 late penalties. James O'Connor, who was persecuted right at the announcement, was lauded all of a sudden. And we get a game, and the Chiefs lose to the Blues in their last game, and we get quarterfinal, semi-final, final at home. Small moments went our way this year, and that, cheapest, how satisfying was that? But the effort and energy that went into the year before was just as great. We just didn't get the rub of the green of the outcomes for all the reasons we've talked about. And then I just think the consistency of, in 2004, I just wanted to be really consistent around, the board, Colin, Angus, were prepared to wait for the review, and what came out of the review was going to be a determinant in terms of whether I stayed on or not. And in their view, they saw enough in me to allow me to do it the second year. And I just wanted to be consistent and say, well, look, if there's flags or if there's things emerging that I'm not aware of and they're not aware of, but they emerge in the review, I needed to have the confidence that, okay, if now I've been made aware of these, I'm not happy, and it's not the right thing. But they didn't, and excited about 26, moving in under the roof at Te Kaha, and it's going to be one of the most special seasons, I think. We've got a group that's highly motivated. Coaching groups had a year together, and that little bit of synergies. We're moving through from storming, norming, we're starting to performing and into high performance as a coaching group. Some interesting conversations about where our game can go. What we've got is our bread, our bread and butter, and then where can we evolve our game from last year? So we're always moving forward. And the impact of playing under a roof in front of a great parochial crowd.
Amazing. I feel like from the outside, it was possibly easy to underestimate the scale of the transition from 23 to 2024. That from the outside, a lot of people just saw the transition of the coach. And when you think it's coach, it's coaching group, it's player, like how much you just referred to norming, storming, and not performing, like how much 2024 was such a new team, even though it's the same team, but it's a totally new team. And that turnaround, what a fairy tale turnaround. And now so excited as well for 2026 under our new stadium. It's going to be amazing.
It is.
Rob, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I have loved this conversation. I've learned so much from it. It's been a real delight. Thanks for coming in.
It's been a pleasure, Kyla. Thank you for all the great work you're doing. Look forward to future conversations.
Thank you so much for listening. Do you see what I mean about Rob? Like, if you just see him on TV or in the coach's box, you might think he's so gruff and serious, but then in reality, so caring and thoughtful and so full of love. So good. I love my job. That was so much fun. Thank you again for listening. Please do let me know your feedback. You can reach me at hello@kylacolbin.com. A big shout out to Max, who is listening to the pod while recovering from knee surgery. Thank you so much for listening. Max, I am cheering you on for your recovery. Of course, to everyone else listening, please do like, subscribe, follow. I am grateful as always for your offerings to the algorithm gods. Thanks again, and see you next week. Hunger and Heart is brought to you by the Crusaders Leadership Program. Whether you're coaching under fives or a professional team, we all want the same thing: to build a culture of trust, to get the best out of your people, and to grow players into leaders. The Crusaders Leadership Program lets you get up close and personal with some of the greatest rugby legends of all time. People like Sir Wayne Smith, Sam Whitelock, Kieran Reid. You'll connect with a global group of ambitious, caring coaches from a range of codes and backgrounds, and most importantly, you'll gain skills and techniques to drive impact and outcomes for your team. The Crusaders Leadership Program is a 2-week, high-intensity virtual experience. It is delivered exclusively online, accessible from anywhere. Hunger and Heart listeners get 10% off the full price of the program. Use the code HUNGER at checkout. You can find out more about the Crusaders Leadership Program at crusadersleadership.com. That's crusadersleadership.com. Hunger and Heart is created by BOMA and the entire BOMA team, including Tito Bernal, Ray Jangle, Hannah Hudson, Johanna Coxon, Sunil Unka, and me, Kyla Colbin. Thanks for listening.